Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. Bowdoin, Maine, Tuesday, April 17th, 9:20 a.m. There's been a lot made about the two recent mass shootings in Texas, and they certainly deserve a lot of attention. I myself have done videos about at least one of them. But what the white media hasn't told you about was a mass killing that took place just a few weeks before, in Maine. This mass killing hasn't received much white media attention at all, and when you see who is involved, it becomes clear why. A little before 9 o'clock a.m. on Monday, April the 17th, Lisa Shea decided to pay a welfare check on her sister Patricia Egger and her husband Robert. Lisa had recently stayed with the Eggers, and she texted her sister that she had left a sweatshirt at their home. But Lisa didn't hear back from her sister, and that was highly unusual. But nothing could have prepared Lisa for what she found when she arrived at her sister's home. As she walked up to the house, she saw blood on the steps outside, along with broken glass. When she went into the home, she found bullet holes, blood, and guns strewn about the house. Then she came across a body with a sheet over it. It was her brother-in-law, Robert Egger, age 72. Lisa called 911. Police soon arrived, and when they entered the home, they found 3 additional bodies. The second body was Robert Egger's wife, Patricia. The other 2 bodies were a second married couple, David and Cynthia Eaton, who had been friends of the Eggers and staying with them. The murderer had even killed the Eggers' family dog as well. Police said all the bodies had been covered with sheets. Investigators who responded to the scene found a note on the kitchen island inside the house. Whoever wrote the note wrote about having been molested, that nothing was done about it, and that they wanted to be free of their pain. About 10:30 a.m., an hour after police had been notified about the slaughter in Bowdoin, law enforcement in the area began receiving frantic calls about an active shooter firing on motorists on Interstate 295 in Yarmouth, which was 25 miles south of the mass murder scene in Bowdoin. Reports were that at least 3 people had been shot, one of them critically. Police converged on the highway and shut it down. The driver of the car ditched the vehicle and tried to escape on foot. Police ordered everyone in the area to shelter in place while they began canvassing. They went from business to business asking if anyone had seen a person come through, wet and muddy, fleeing the scene. At 10:48 a.m., 911 received a call reporting that a suspicious man had been standing in the middle of the road, waving his hands with what appeared to be blood on his clothing. 10:50 a.m., police had found and arrested a suspect in a wooded area near the car the shooter had used. And of course, since he was the right skin color, police arrested him alive. No word on whether they took him to Burger King. I guess you have to kill black victims in order to get the free lunch special. The killer had blood on his clothing, and police found multiple cartridge casings of various calibers in the vehicle that he had been driving. Police found out that the car belonged to the Eatons. They had rented it for their trip to visit the Eggers. The killer was taken for medical treatment and then booked. He was identified as 34-year-old Joseph Eaton. He was the son of David and Cynthia Eaton. As it turned out, the reason David and Cynthia were in town and staying with the Eggers was because Joseph was about to get out of prison, and his parents wanted to be there to greet him. Joseph had been released on April 14th, 2023, and he murdered his parents and their friends just 4 days later. Joseph Eaton is being held without bail and has since been arraigned on 4 counts of murder. He's already confessed to killing his parents and the Eggers and shooting at the people on the interstate. According to state police, Joseph told them the reason he had been shooting at people on the highway was because he thought he was being followed. As the investigation progressed that day, investigators found that Joseph had posted a video on Facebook the day before the killing. He alluded to alleged traumas that he had suffered in the past. Basically, it was a pity party on video. He actually lamented that nobody was giving him a chance to prove what a good guy he could be and how they weren't Christians because of that. And you won't be surprised to hear that over the last 15 years, which is all of his adult life, Joseph Eaton has been charged with more than a half-dozen crimes, including domestic violent assault, aggravated assault, violating a restraining order, endangering the welfare of a child, and driving under the influence. Time and again, he would be jailed, and of course, because he has genetic immunity from law, you could practically count the seconds until he was back on the streets again. Now, it took more than a little searching to piece together all the information because the white media's accounting is predictably not exactly complete, and some of it is contradictory, especially his 2021 conviction, but here's the best that I found. His crime spree began in 2008 in Kansas. He was still a juvenile at the time, but that didn't stop him from getting 2 cases, one for burglarizing a home, the other for theft and battery. He was convicted in 2009 and given 24 months probation immediately afterwards. During that time, he had more than a dozen people write letters petitioning the court to let him serve his probation in Maine with his fiancée, who was pregnant with his child at the time. In fact, the Eggers, who he would later go on to murder, were part of that group. They petitioned the court on Joseph Eaton's behalf. As his future victim Patty Egger would write, "He's becoming a fine young man." More like a natural-born killer. By spring of 2013, Eaton was separated from his fiancée, who had custody of their 2-year-old son. The fiancée had filed a protective order against him. During visitation, Joseph tried to force his fiancée back into the relationship and accused her of seeing someone else and threatened to kill her. Eaton pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and was sentenced to 3 years. Probation. Not prison time for this already convicted criminal, but just more probation, because he did so well last time. But of course that didn't last long, because in August 2014, he was back in front of a judge again for violating his probation by sending his ex-fiancée a slew of messages even after she told him to stop. In 2015, Joseph Eaton remarried and had another child, but predictably he continued the same pattern of abuse. He violated his probation by driving drunk in 2015, and nothing was done about that. In December 2015, he was arrested on domestic assault charges while living in a mobile home with his wife and their newborn. When police put Eaton in the cop car, he began to kick the door of the vehicle and bang his head against the window. He then threatened to attack the police. In 2016, he pleaded guilty to felony assault and misdemeanor domestic violence assault. He underwent a psychiatric assessment after that arrest, and the documentation said he posed, quote, "a concern to the community's safety with a high probability." Probationer Eaton is likely to reoffend. But of course that didn't stop him from being released again. January 2018, Joseph Eaton started the new year with the same old crimes, this time terrorizing his aunt. This guy clearly has an issue with women. She called the sheriff's office because Joseph was having a mental breakdown and had a gun. This was doubly illegal since he had been convicted of assault, which is a felony. When deputies arrived, Joseph was found breaking household items with a wooden baseball bat. He charged at the police with the bat, but of course, because he wasn't black, they didn't open fire. Instead, they used their tasers and arrested him just fine. Joseph was taken into custody. He claimed to be on meth, heroin, and marijuana, and he was sentenced to 3 years for 3 counts of aggravated assault of a first responder and wrongful possessions of a firearm. CBS says that he served 3 months of his sentence, but other white media outlets say that he served all 3 years. In either case, everyone agrees this psycho was back on the loose again in February of 2021, but he didn't stay free for very long because less than a month later he was arrested again due to his probation being revoked for an aggravated assault conviction, this time in Maine. Now, I wasn't able to find out what the assault charge in Maine was in relation to. Regardless, his probation was revoked and he had been in jail for 2 years up until his release last month, a few days before he went on his murder spree. So this guy has been a one-man crime wave with criminal convictions in at least 3 different states. But when you have genetic immunity from law, it's like playing a video game with unlimited lives. The aggravated assault conviction is a felony, and having a close family member accusing him of having a gun you would think would have at least made something happen, but of course we know the laws are color-coded. So you have this reprobate who fathers numerous children, beats his wives, breaks into people's houses, assaults people, the whole 9, and he's just put back out on the streets again, over and over, because there's no such thing as racial privilege in America, right? The white media buried this incident, and when I say buried, I mean they buried it. They literally treated it as a 2-day story, and after that, they stopped all reporting on it. This is newsworthy mainly because of the cruel irony that the Eggers, who were the ones who went to the mat for this guy when he was a young thug, and they were the ones who helped to get him out of jail, how did he repay their kindness? By murdering both of them. There's no good deed goes unpunished, and then there's just an evil bastard. But you won't see anyone saying that it was woke judges who kept letting this career convict off the hook. Oh, that right-wing talking point gets put on hold whenever something like this happens. Because the judges who did this were mostly down in Florida. The judges who kept letting this guy out of a cage over and over again were down in Ron DeSantis' neck of the woods. But you won't see anyone in the white media making those kind of connections, because to do that would be to call out racial privilege in the judicial system, and they're not about to do that. And there's one more thing I want to comment on. Bowdoin, Maine is, you guessed it, a rural farming community with a population of about 3,000 people. So you have 7 people shot, 4 fatally, by a career criminal who left a path of destruction across 3 states, and 90% of you listening to me hadn't even heard of this incident before I told you about it this morning. This is why I do these crime reports. Because while the white media and their racist operatives online try to tell you that black people are committing all the crime in America, I decided I would tell you about all of the mass shootings that the white media won't. I want you guys to give my crime reports a perusal sometime. Go into the archives on this channel. Count up how many mass killings, not shootings, but killings that I've been able to compile for you. All on my lonesome. I do it for a reason. The white media will make sure you hear about Pookie and Ray Ray holding up a convenience store, or about 2 killed, 5 injured by gangbangers on the south side of Chicago. But those are distractions for the white media. I show you where in Oklahoma alone, you've had at least 2 mass murders take place in the last 8 months. And the white media treated these slaughters as one-and-done stories. If it bleeds, it leads. That is, if a black person did the deed. They look for any black offender they can, and when they find one, doesn't matter if it's punching someone in the face or a shootout in Chicago, the white media will run it around the clock. Film at 11, and 12, and 1, and 2. Well, the black media doesn't operate like that. News is the information you need to keep your power. And helping you push back against the white media's anti-black narratives is an important part of our mission. The white media may be able to bury the lead, but we won't let them bury the truth, too. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Stay Positive, Fidel Phillips, Onan Smith, Nadoro Emblem, and Isaac. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.